Well, welcome to Christian Virtual Fellowship. My name is John Truitt. Tonight we are going to be talking about lies and um, different kinds of lying and all kinds of stuff about lies. Before I get into that, though, let me just say a few things about Christian Virtual Fellowship is a ministry of allegiance to the King, and you can find us online at either of the two uh, web links there, allegiancetotheking.org or a2kchurch.org. And or you can, if you're uh, watching or listening to the YouTube video, they'll be in the description section as well. If you are feeling isolated and looking for a place to meet up with others who believe the Father is the one true God and that Jesus is his unique Son and chosen King of his kingdom, please feel free to join us on Zoom. We meet every Wednesday night at 7:30 Eastern U.S. time and every Sunday morning at 9:30 Eastern U.S. time. And we also have a number of things going on. We have weekly small groups. We have daily prayer meetings. We have monthly communion services. We are a church community. Our intention is to provide a church community online for isolated Unitarians who don't have a local church to go to and be who they are. Okay, so let's get into this. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 25 says this: Therefore, ridding yourselves of falsehood, speak truth, each one of you with his neighbor, because we are parts of one another. So we all know that lying is bad. Right? I think everybody, you don't have to be a Christian to know that lying is bad. And we know that we're not supposed to lie to each other, like this says here. But I believe that lying is so much more prevalent than we realize, even in our own lives. So in this teaching, we're going to take a little time to examine lying and think about how the various kinds of lying can creep into our lives. So we're going to talk about a number of categories of lies. We're going to look at these categories. We're going to start with some descriptions and a few examples of these different kinds of lying. So we'll look at deception, lies of protection, omission, avoidance, exaggeration, flattery. We'll look at a quick look at pathological lying and self-deception. And so we'll go into that first, and then we'll look in the Bible at what God has to say about some of this stuff. So lies of deception. So this is, I think, probably for most people is what they would typically think about lying. Deceptive lies are intentional falsehoods designed to mislead or trick someone into believing something that the liar knows to be untrue. The primary motive behind these lies is often to gain an advantage, hide wrongdoing, or manipulate a situation to the liar's benefit. So this is a pretty broad description of lying in general. The fact that you're telling something that's not true, and you're doing it to deceive because you're going to get some benefit from lying about something. And an example would be like a salesman who's exaggerating or lying about some feature of a product so that it sounds better to the customer and they'll buy it, even though the salesperson knows that it doesn't really do what he or she is saying. Lies of protection are sort of at the other end of the spectrum that we just talked about in deception. And we often think of these as either harmless or even the best thing to do in a situation, and that is a possibility. But we can also be fooled into thinking that a lie is for someone's good when really we may be just avoiding dealing with a situation. So let me give the description here. Protective lies are told with the intention of shielding someone from the truth to spare their feelings, prevent worry, or avoid causing them distress. These lies are often considered benign or even compassionate, as the liar's motive is to protect the other person rather than to benefit themselves. We often call these white lies. So an example would be a parent telling their child that their pet has gone to live on a farm where it will be happier instead of revealing that the pet has died. The intent here is to protect the child from the pain or loss. So, there can be times when, a lie is told to protect someone, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but we have to be careful about it's still a lie, and it may come back to bite us later. When we tell something that's not true. You may, for instance, know that a friend's spouse is cheating on them, and you feel really bad for your friend. And so, maybe you don't tell them about it. Maybe you even lie about something because you're trying to protect your friend from the pain that the knowledge of that situation is going to cause. But then maybe at some point they find out about it, and they find out that you knew about it and didn't tell them. And so, that now they're angry with you because, you were trying to protect them, but you essentially lied to them. So, next one is omission. And kind of lying is really tempting, too tempting. It's really easy to leave out little important details that create false understanding in the other person, which may, for instance, make the situation more palatable. Maybe you're looking to not look so bad, and you leave out some important piece. So here's the description. In lies of omission, crucial information is deliberately withheld to manipulate the truth. The liar doesn't fabricate facts, but chooses not to disclose important details that would significantly alter the recipient's understanding of the situation. These lies can be particularly insidious because they exploit the truth's ambiguity. An example would be an employee is asked about a project delay and blames unforeseen technical issues, deliberately omitting that the delay was primarily due to their procrastination. This omission shapes the employer's perception unfairly, absolving the employee of direct responsibility. And in each of these cases, you can kind of think in terms of, in Christian life, these kinds of things, we're tempted by these different kinds of lying. Where it can happen in a church, in Christian relationships, that maybe we left something out, and it didn't make the situation look quite so bad, or maybe we omitted something and it helped to shift the blame in a more general direction rather than pointing right at us or at somebody that we didn't want it to point to. Next one is lies of avoidance. Let me give you the description first, then I'll talk about it. Lies of avoidance are used to evade uncomfortable conversations, confrontations, or the revelation of the truth that the liar finds inconvenient, embarrassing, or damaging. These lies often manifest as diversions, half-truths, or changing the subject entirely. So this kind of lying is diversionary in nature. It often occurs when someone is trying to avoid shame or avoid dealing with an uncomfortable situation. For example, if you've been having a really hard time lately and someone at church asks, "How's it going?" and you answer, "Oh, it's good." You just lied to them in order to avoid uncomfortableness of telling them the truth. In some cases, this might be a protective lie if it's a person that you don't trust, but often we're just hiding the truth. And by doing so, we actually rob the body of Christ from being able to help. There's the example that I found online. When asked about a missing sum of money, a person claims ignorance and quickly changes the topic to an unrelated urgent issue that needs attention, thus avoiding further inquiries into the matter. This strategy diverts scrutiny and keeps the lie undetected. Next is exaggeration. And, we've all, I am sure, I don't think that I am exaggerating in saying that we've all done this. It's so easy and tempting to exaggerate, maybe just even a little bit. And you can think about how tempting it is to embellish a story a little bit to make it sound a little bit more compelling. Maybe you're trying to convince somebody of something, so you exaggerate the facts a little bit in order to help to convince them. So these are lies where the truth is stretched beyond its actual bounds to make something appear more impressive or significant than it really is. This can be done to enhance one's own image, to make a story more entertaining, or to gain sympathy or admiration.
I leave.
An example, a student claims that they spent 20 hours studying for an exam when in reality, oops, what happened? Oh, there we go. When in reality, it was only a few hours. Their intent is to appear more dedicated or to justify their position. So you can see that, you know, this is, it's just very, very easy to fall into the trap of exaggerating. I think about, I don't know if you guys have ever experienced this, but I've experienced it both in my own heart and I've experienced it when I knew about a situation and somebody else is recounting that situation and I know they're exaggerating uh, and they're maybe telling some other person about it. The most insidious, I think, is when you're talking about something that the Lord's done, and maybe just the facts of it are a good story, but but maybe I or whoever's recounting this story maybe builds it up a little bit more than it actually was. And now we're actually lying about the Lord and what he's done. So but it can be really easy to fall into that trap. Lies of flattery. And you know, I think in general, well, let me just read this. These lies are told to win favor or to compliment someone in a way that is not sincere. They are often used in social or professional contexts to ingratiate oneself with others. Example would be telling a coworker they gave an outstanding presentation when you actually found it unremarkable, just to maintain a good relationship or to appear supportive. So I like the example here because typically we think of flattery as where you're really trying to again ingratiate yourself with someone, maybe to get a promotion. So maybe it's your boss and you're just really flattering your boss uh, um and you're hoping that you gain something out of that. But it could be just simply that maybe you didn't think it was, all that great. And so you lie about the situation and you tell them that it is good, whatever it is, and you're just trying to be supportive to them, but you're actually lying to them. So let me give you one that I think happens in most households and probably happens to the tune of thousands of times a day. And that's that your spouse asks you a question like, does this make me look bad? Or, do I look good in this? Or what did you think about, the talk that I gave or the song that I sang at church or whatever, whatever it was. And in your mind and your heart, you're thinking, yeah, well, I didn't really think that much about it, or yeah, it was okay, but or yes, it does actually make you look fat, but either you don't want them to be mad at you, or you don't want to hurt their feelings, and so you no, it was really great. It's oh yeah, you were so good, and that kind of thing, and maybe we're tempted to feel like that's a good thing to do because we're making them feel better. We're not hurting their feelings and that kind of stuff. But the reality is, yeah, we're still telling a lie. So is it really right to do that?
You told me recently it was.
I think it is, yeah. So I'm just going to mention this briefly. This is a different case. This is pathological lying. Pathological lying is a compulsive behavior where a person tells lies habitually, seemingly without a clear motive or benefit. This type of lying is often a symptom of a deeper psychological issue and can be very destructive to personal relationships. Example would be a person who consistently tells elaborate, detailed lies about events that never happened, achievements they never earned, or relationships they never had, even when these lies bring no apparent advantage or are easily disproven. And I've actually worked with a few people that were very clearly pathological liars. They were constantly making up stories that made absolutely no sense. And it wasn't like they were really getting any benefit from it. They were just lying about stuff. I remember I had a coworker one time. I worked with several people who had been in the military, and and a couple of them had actually had careers in the military. And so they got into a conversation about what weapons that they had fired, whether it was just a regular gun or whether it was some sort of larger piece of equipment like a howitzer or something like that. And they were going through that, and then this guy um, told him that he had been in the military too, and he was like, "Yeah, I fired one of those," and yeah, I fired one of those too, and finally one of the other guys said, "Well, did you fire a such and such?" And he said, "Yeah, I fired one of those." And it was something like the military designation for your utensils that you eat with, right? That everybody knew in the military what those were called, right? And so it was clear that not only did he not know what he was talking about, but he hadn't been in the military. And it was just a silly thing, but it was like he couldn't help it. And so when we run into this kind of situation, I believe we need to have a compassion. Something is really wrong with this person at a deep psychological level, and they need professional help. If it's possible for us, we really need to try to help this person, especially if they're a Christian, help them to get some professional help for that. All right, so last one is self-deception, and I don't know that this is necessarily a comprehensive list. By the way, you may be able to identify some others. Self-deception. In self-deception, a person tricks themselves into believing a falsehood. They may not be fully aware that they're denying the truth, as they might subconsciously rationalize or deny reality. This makes self-deception a complicated issue to recognize and a complicated issue uh, to both recognize and address. Um, and then an example would be a person involved in an affair might justify their actions by blaming their partner's lack of attention, convincing themselves they're compelled by circumstances rather than choosing to sin. The self-deception allows them to continue without facing the guilt of their moral wrongdoing. So I like to think about this that when when we deceive ourselves, we're actually lying to ourselves that and we are sinning against ourselves that we don't want to do that, right? We shouldn't lie to other people and deceive other people. Well, the same applies to doing that to ourselves. We shouldn't, in whether you're talking about lying or other kinds of sin, just like we shouldn't sin against other people, we should not sin against ourselves. We need to be honest with ourselves. And sometimes that can be really, really difficult. If you're having to face a very difficult truth, it can be self-soothing to lie to yourself. If you failed at something and it really was your fault, it's easy to go around blaming the circumstances and other people and those kinds of things and actually believe that. You're really convinced it wasn't your fault. It was all these other people's fault. But everyone around you, knows, no, that was you. You did that. It's just not, it's not good to deceive yourself. Okay. So let's look at, what does God say about lying? We're going to look at, a number of verses where we get instruction about lying. So first is Colossians. We already looked at Ephesians earlier. Colossians chapter 3, verses 9 through 10 says, "Do not lie to one another, since you stripped off the old self with its evil practices, and have put on the new self, which is being renewed to a true knowledge according to the image of the one who created it." So when we lie to each other, we are actually practicing evil. That's pretty strong language. This is pretty straightforward. We should not lie to one another. And and if we do, we need to face the music that we're being evil. Proverbs 12:22 says, lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but those who deal faithfully are his delight. Um, it might not be that in some of these categories of lying, depending on the degree of the lie, it might not reach the level of abomination to the Lord. But I need to ask myself the question, well, when do I cross that line? And um, probably I want to be really, really careful about that. I don't want to approach that line. Leviticus chapter 19, verse 11 says, you shall not steal, nor deal falsely, nor lie to one another. So yeah, pretty straightforward. That's an Old Testament commandment under the old Mosaic law. Don't lie to one another. So from Colossians to Leviticus, we can see that this standard where God does not want us to lie to one another doesn't change. That honesty, openness and honesty with each other is important to God, enough so that he's going to put these straightforward statements in. And then John 8:44, you are, this is Jesus talking, and he says, you are of your father the devil, and you want to do the desires of your father. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth, because there is no truth in him. Whenever he tells a lie, he speaks from his own nature, because he is a liar and the father of lies. Well, okay, so if the devil is the father of lies, what that means is that he is the um, he is he's the one who birthed the concept. He's the one who gave birth to it. And that when you are lying, if I'm lying, I'm actually making him into my father. I am following after him in that. That's a I don't know, that seems like something to be avoided to me. Psalm 34:12-14. Who is the person who desires life and loves length of days that he may see good? Right? And so the psalmist is going to answer this question. Keep your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking deceit. Turn from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. So I'm pretty sure it's David who wrote Psalm 34. When he says, if you want to see if you love your life and you want to see, good and length of days, one of the major things, one of the core things that you need to do is don't lie. Don't deceive people. Yeah, come on. There we go. Proverbs 28:13. One who conceals his wrongdoings will not prosper, but one who confesses and abandons them will find compassion. One of the main things that we lie about is our wrongdoings. Either uh, we don't we don't confess, we don't tell that we've done something wrong. Maybe we um, tell a lie that shifts blame someplace else. Maybe we just make up something to cover whatever the wrongdoing was. And God is telling us that to hide through your wrongdoing through lies is you're you're not going to get anywhere with God, certainly, but it's going to cause you all kinds of trouble with God. But if you confess it and abandon it, then you'll find compassion. And I think about this. This is a standard from God. We also need to think this way, that if somebody has lied to us, but they confessed the lie and repented, right? Then we need to have compassion on them, right? It's only right for us in that situation, because it can be hard sometimes to want to forgive somebody who's lied to you, especially if it's a big, a big lie, something really, really heinous. Finally, Proverbs chapter 28, verse 13. One who conceals what? Oh, I know I had another verse. I don't know what I did. Oh, well, sorry. All right, let's move on. Am I lying? I want to ask that question. I want to ask that question of myself on a regular basis. Like in all things, I want to be perfect, like my Heavenly Father is perfect. And so one of the things that I have to think about is, am I committing one of these categories of lies? So now that we looked at all those categories and we saw that lying isn't just making up a story, right? It can be omitting key facts. It could be telling a little white lie to, protect somebody, or maybe maybe I'm the one who I'm trying to protect in reality. It could be that I'm deceiving myself. It could be to avoid some consequences. And so there's all these different ways in which I might be lying. So I need to be honest with myself. And so I need to do some self-reflection, right? I need to uh, I like doing this, that I pray that you know, the Lord will help me not to do these kinds of things. And one of the things that I ask the Lord to do is that if I'm starting to do something that's a sin, that the Lord will bring my awareness to the forefront of my mind. And if I am, um, if I'm not, um, if I'm not aware that I'm sinning, maybe I'm deceiving myself, and the Lord brings it to my mind, I have a choice at that moment to decide either to um, continue in the lie or to stop the lying. And and it's those moments that make the difference about which path are we on. Are we on the narrow path that leads to life, or are we on the broad way that leads to destruction? So self-reflection is really important, and we can ask the Lord to help us with that. So a question I might ask myself is, am I adding just a little bit to the story that I'm telling? Um, you know, Sometimes, if you can write fiction and you can make up stories and tell people stories, but if you're representing a story as true and there's some sort of significance to it, like for instance, maybe if I'm telling a story about um, a miracle that I witnessed, and but I'm adding a little dramatic effect to the story. It's not really what happened. I may even get to the place where I've convinced myself that that's really what happened if I'm not careful. So I need to reflect about that. And I want to avoid that. Am I hiding things from the people I love? This is that, omission. And it could be just that I'm lying in the sense that I'm hiding something completely. I'm not telling my loved ones about the whatever it is. It could be a full-blown sin, or it could be as simple as I'm, you know, I am hiding something, like let's say I told my wife that I was going to stop eating sweets, and so I've got some, but I went and bought some, chocolate, and I've got it stashed away someplace. And when she's not looking, I take a little bit of chocolate. I'm lying when I'm doing that, right? So it doesn't have to be a huge sin. And when Jesus goes through the Sermon on the Mount, especially in the latter half of chapter 5, he's giving us examples of how to fulfill the law, and it's bought from the inside out. I've got to get my heart clean. I've got to be motivated on the inside, and I've got to think about, how do I die to self? How do I live self-sacrificially? And and so it those little lies can be, while they may not seem as bad as a really big lie, it's still infecting my heart with something that is patterned after the father of lies. So if I want to have a pure heart, I need to get that stuff out of there. So I don't want to hide things from those that I love. Do we trust each other enough to tell the truth? Right? This, I think, um, if I'm omitting something, if I'm sort of changing the story a little bit, um, one of the things that might be going on there is it could be like if somebody asks me how I'm doing and I'm not doing well at all, I'm really, maybe I'm depressed, maybe I'm angry, maybe I had some really bad news, and I tell the person, oh, I'm doing great, right? Well, I just lied to them because I'm not doing great. One of the things that can come up about that is maybe I don't trust that person. Maybe because I just don't know them. Maybe they haven't done anything to make me distrust them, but maybe I don't want to tell them all of my, dirty laundry. But but is is that because it was just somebody who, I met in a grocery line and then it doesn't really matter? Or is this someone that I'm actually in the body of Christ with? Maybe, another member of my church. If the situation is such that I don't really trust them to be honest with them, that's a bigger, almost, that's certainly in the current situation, it's a bigger problem. The fact that we don't trust each other enough to tell the truth. Maybe I'm not telling them the truth because I need to tell them the truth about what they're doing, and I don't want to do it because I know how they're going to react. And so I don't trust them to act appropriately in this situation. Well, that's a problem in and of itself, and we're not being honest about it. We're just let it sweep it under the rug. We're not, it's a kind of lying when we do that. If we can't be honest with each other because we don't trust each other, we have a big problem in the body of Christ. We have a big problem, and we need to deal with it. Can we be mature enough to be honest with each other? You know what? If we're not mature enough to be honest with each other, then we need to address that, right? We need to work on that. If um, I'm in this church and you guys are avoiding telling me something because you don't think I can handle it. All right. Well, I need help to get to the place where I can handle it. And so we need to, again, reflect on these things. If somebody, if I'm hesitating to tell somebody because I think they're going to react badly or they can't handle it or whatever, well, then I need to follow that thought with, well, should they be mature enough at this point? And they're not? Well, that's a problem. And it's a problem that needs to be dealt with. If I think, well, I'm not sure maybe they're a baby Christian, right? They've just come out of the world in a way that's really beat them down. Okay, well, maybe in that case, they're not ready for it. But we still need to think about these things and ask these questions. Will we trust God enough to just be honest with each other, right? At a certain point, we need to say, I'm not sure that the reason I'm not being honest with other people is because I don't trust God. God tells us um, to not to lie to each other. So he's the one who's given this commandment to us. So do we trust him enough to obey him even if there's consequences? I think we need to ask that question. God is a God of truth. Do I really want to imitate the father of lies, right? I think for me, when I was thinking about all this stuff and starting to, put together this thing, and I was thinking about, that verse that we read earlier, and it's like, yeah, I don't, I want my father to be God. I want to pattern myself after Jesus, who patterns himself after God. I do not want to pattern myself after the devil. And so lies are patterning after the devil. So I think that's again something to reflect on and think about. If I'm finding myself sort of in a gray area about again things like omission or lies of protection and stuff like that, and maybe I need to think about how can I change that in this situation so I can be honest because I don't want to be like the devil. And then finally, what do I need to do to be more um honest right now? Right? What do I need to be? I'm sorry, I'm honest about right now. What is it in my life right now that I'm not being honest about? And how do I change that? Is it that there's somebody that I need to tell something to and I don't want to? Why am I avoiding that situation? Why am I not just being honest in that situation? And what do I need to do so that I can change and be honest in that situation? Do I need to pray and ask the Lord for strength because I know it's going to be a bad situation and it's going to be painful to deal with, and that's why I'm avoiding it. And I just need the Lord to be there for me so that I can have the courage. Do I need some advice from somebody on how do I get honest with this person about this situation? Um, you know, that's you know, we need to do that. And so we need to reflect on these things, I believe, on a continual basis because lying is so prevalent. Because it can be easy to do it in small ways that seem that we justify as insignificant, when in reality it's uh, um, it's a fairly rare situation where a lie is appropriate. It's not what our Father would do. Maybe I'm not ready to tell somebody something. That can be certainly true. But if I'm avoiding that situation just because I'm just trying to protect myself or avoid consequences or whatever, then I am lying at that point. And certainly, if I'm changing reality, telling a story, um, for whatever reason, I am being like the father of lies, and I need to stop. I need to change that. And because we can start with those little bitty lies and get ourselves into a situation where we're building a habit of that. Um, I believe that this is a pattern that we need, or not a pattern, but a an area of our lives that we need to guard against. Because again, God is a God of truth, He's a God of honesty, and we need to be like Him. Okay, so let me open it up for questions, thoughts. What do you guys think? Yeah, Samuel.
Yeah, thank you, John, for the lesson. Usually when someone speaks, there's different things that sort of goes through my mind. Whenever you first talked about the subject, something that I thought about was something that I heard a pastor say last year. And it's one of the reasons, well, I had already been thinking about coming out publicly, or publicly, quote unquote, as a biblical Unitarian, but it was something that sort of, pushed me even forward. He said, lying isn't just about what you say, it's about what you imply. And I
Hmm.
think that covers a lot of the different categories of lying that you shared about, right? It's the different ways that we give off certain implications. So maybe I didn't technically lie, but you're avoiding certain implications or you're giving off false implications. And so that was just one thought. And then I guess just in regard to what you're talking about at the end there, um, because that's something that I've always thought about that I've heard preachers say before about like, oh, we come to church with and people ask us how are you doing and it's always like, oh, I'm good. Or maybe if you go to like more churchy kind of answer, like, oh, blessed and highly favored, that kind of thing. But I've heard preachers talk about that before, like, now we're lying to people. And so I started last year when I was going to my previous church, I started being more honest with people who ask me about that kind of stuff. And so I have two thoughts right here. One is, like you were mentioning, that oftentimes you want to be careful to not put maybe a burden that's heavy on a new believer or a believer that's less mature. Um, and what I found is that with just practice, it becomes easy to be able to be honest with someone that you're struggling without necessarily going into too much detail.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yep.
that is something that can be practiced, and you can harness that skill so that you're not ever in that situation of like, oh, well, I want to be honest with this person that I'm not doing amazing, but it's not a situation that I can talk about publicly, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
I just want to encourage anybody who's listening, like if you just practice that, then you'll get better at it. And oftentimes the reason lie is always motivated by fear. It's a fear of, if I tell the truth, what's going to happen to me? That's Adam and Eve, right? If I tell God the truth, what's going to happen to me? And what I found is that we oftentimes in our heads, we over exaggerate the consequences of things sometimes. So we think that if, oh, I tell the truth and this person is offended or something, the whole world's going to fall apart. And we oftentimes over exaggerate what's going to happen. So just I encourage people to practice, and you'll get better at it. And then just a quick thought that I had. I have a lot of sometimes weird thoughts, but this one I don't think is as weird. So I think that a very good way to start answering that particular question, uh, that can easily lead to more discussion, or can be like a very good way to a very honest way, I guess, to present yourself is, so like, John, you come up to me and hey, Samuel, how are you doing? 75%. That is, I think, a very natural and intuitive way of letting somebody know how I'm doing and how I feel. And you can say, okay, well, like, okay, like that's not bad. It tells you that's not bad, but I'm not 100%, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that might be a way that I might start answering that question. Then I can go into detail about, like, uh, like, oh, like I've been, doing well, but I've been struggling with my diet or something. And so it's just a very natural way. And if you say like, oh, 45%, like somebody can tell, okay, then you really need more help. Um, and then based on the details that you give them for the follow-up, you know, you can guide and direct the discussion. But yeah, that was just some of the thoughts that I had. And yeah, so I might start doing that, see what happens. But yeah, so this is a few random thoughts that I had. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good stuff, Samuel. The implication thing, where you made me think about how it, you can be aware that someone has misunderstood. They thought that something that you said. So if you take the idea of, the Trinity and whatnot, and if you're in a Trinitarian church, and maybe there's a discussion that comes up or whatever, and you're able to kind of respond in a way that it doesn't cause someone to question further. Yeah, that's a kind of lying. There's a term that an English word, dissemble, that means this sort of thing. I remember reading um, uh, John Calvin talked about, when he was still in France, he was going to a Catholic church, and he was still doing all the Catholic things, even though he had decided to reject all that. And so because he was still doing the activities, even though he had rejected Catholic doctrines, all the people around him were assuming he was still a Catholic. And he realized later that it's a form of lying. When you act or say stuff in a certain way that allows for someone to think that something else is true, right? So no, that's good stuff. And I agree 100% in terms of not you know, you don't have to, you know, air out everything. If somebody asks you how you doing and you're not in a good position, you can say, honestly, I need a lot of prayer right now. I don't really want to go into the details, but I'm not doing great. And, you know, if you keep me in your prayers, I'd really appreciate it. That's good enough. You know, you were honest with them, and you don't have to go into all the details to be honest. So that's good stuff. Thanks, Samuel. Suzanne.
This is such a loaded topic, and it's so interesting because in my ethics class last summer in seminary, we had a whole week on discussing this topic. And, let me just start by saying, okay, so there's a whole school of thought among theologians and Bible scholars that feel like there is a difference between a falsehood and a lie. So in other words, a lie is an intentional falsehood that violates someone's right to know the truth. But according to the Bible, supposedly there's occasions when deception is ethically permissible. So, it starts going into muddy waters. We had some really interesting discussions on this, but one of the main arguments that my theology teacher, Wayne Grudem, who's very famous for his systematic theology book, his main opponent, like that he discussed this with, was basically, they give the example of it's Nazi Germany and you're hiding the Jews in your attic, and the Nazis come to your door and they say, "Are you hiding any Jews?" And you're supposed to tell the truth because God hates lies. But what are the priorities here? You talk about, and rightly so, that deception and misrepresentation and all those different nuances that you mentioned are kind of a form of lying. But then again, we have all these certain moral obligations. So Wayne Grudem's view was like, well, you don't have to lie. There's always an alternative way that you could say it. Like if the Nazis come to your door and say, "Are you hiding any Jews?" You can just say, "I'm not going to answer that," or whatever. And maybe the way you answer it will make them suspicious, and they'll search your house and they're going to find the people that you're hiding. Maybe there's another way that you can say it without lying. So that's kind of the objective, is that you want to try to find something that you can say that will protect, like if you're in an abusive relationship, if a woman is in an abusive relationship with a man and he's demanding certain answers to certain things, and that if you say something truthful about, like, "Oh, I did go out for an hour, I went to the store." Well, you needed to go to the store because you had to get something important, but your husband has forbidden you to leave the house, or something like that. I mean, I'm just making this up off the top of our head.
Right.
But so there's moments where there's a difference between being truthful and being forthcoming. So it's not deceptive, in my opinion, to withhold information. Like you were saying, if somebody's asking you personal questions, you don't have to be forthcoming, especially if it's somebody you don't know well, or you don't like, or you don't trust. You shouldn't be telling them all your secrets. I think Christians can get really messed up with thinking, "Oh, I've got to tell everybody the truth all the time." And even though the Bible says in Ephesians 4:15 that we're supposed to speak the truth in love, we can still be hurtful or cause serious problems by being forthcoming with the truth. So, yeah, if your friend says, "Does this dress make me look fat?" and it does make you look fat, you might want to say, "Well, it's really not my favorite style, on you. I think I would like it better when you wear this," type of thing. I mean, there's ways to say things that are complimentary and loving, that you don't have to lie. But then there's also that other issue where, like, okay, if you do say certain things that are true, you could be putting somebody in danger. And, like, what is your priority? Like, can you not lie but still be sort of prevaricating? Can you be sort of deceptive, deliberately, to protect, let's say, an innocent child that's going to be hurt? How is God going to look at that? The other thing that we have to look at is that there are a lot of people that lied in the Bible, like Rahab hid the spies, and God sent a lying spirit to deceive Ahab. And we have the example of, what was the other one I was thinking of? The Pharaoh's demand, like for the midwives, for instance. I was looking at this at Exodus 1:17-21. Pharaoh demands that all the Hebrew midwives kill all the newborn baby males, like when Moses was born. And it says that when they lied to Pharaoh and said, oh, the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, they're vigorous and they give birth before a midwife can arrive. In verse 20:21, it says that God dealt well with the midwives and blessed them with families because they protected the Hebrews by lying. Okay, so I have a really hard time doing that blanket thing by saying, okay, the Bible says lying is terrible and you're from your father the devil. But if you're, and then you say, well, if your intent is to deceive, that's wrong. That's a sin. If you do it by accident or with a good intention, then it's not a sin. But here we see examples of people who deliberately, deceitfully misled Pharaoh, for instance. And yes, they weren't under the Mosaic law yet because Moses hadn't even grown up, right? So you might say, okay, but we're getting a feeling of God's heart. Like, okay, God hates lying, but he also hates injustice and cruelty and all these other things. So like, how do we as mature Christians like balance this requirement to be honest and also be mature and morally responsible in the ways of being forthcoming. So I don't know, like I after that week in my ethics class, I was less clear than what I was before, because there's just so much gray area here. And there's so many instances in the Bible where God seems to be okay with deception for the ends justify the means. But we're not God, so we can't like make those kinds of judgment calls.
So I debated about whether or not I was going to include the kind of lying that's called noble lying, which is what you're describing for the most part. You actually had a couple of different categories that you're talking about. But in terms of noble lying, so this would be Rahab and things like that, or the midwives is a really, really good example of that. Certainly, people in dealing with Nazi Germany, hiding Jews, that kind of thing. So, so those, like I said, I debated about including that particular category in my category list, and I ended up not including it for this reason. It's and I'm glad I figured it would come up in the discussion here anyway. The reason I didn't include it is because I don't think it's really a problem for us. I think generally speaking, we know when we are in a situation where we better lie for a greater good, right? So, and there's lots of I think probably one of the more common ones is something like a spousal abuse, and that kind of stuff where you probably do need to lie in that situation for self-protection or that kind of stuff. So so there, but here's what I think about it. And and let me talk about the other category, which both of these are, a lot of noble lying falls under the same category as lies of protection. And so lies of protection really is a if you're it's at that other end of the spectrum, right? Where just a malicious, deceiving lie is at one end, and then the other end is lies of protection, where some lies of protection are really sin and not good, but a lot of lies of protection can be either actually good or at least not really all that serious. And so if you're talking about a situation where it's not a noble lie, but it is a lie of protection, like a white lie, like, does this, outfit make me look fat? And then so you tell them, no. Or maybe you say something completely different. Maybe you actually do like the dress, but yes, it does make them look fat. And so you tell them something about the dress or whatever. And so that the problem as I see it, so you talked about balance. The problem as I see it is that we're out of balance in the other direction, right? Where there's lots of lying that goes on, and um and it's way out of balance in that direction. And so I feel like while it's good to be aware of the fact that, yeah, sometimes deceiving is going to bring about a greater godly good, and it should be done in those cases. No question whatsoever. Um, but that that be aware that, yeah, that can happen. But I feel like those reflective questions that I was asking, and you can add your own questions to that at that last slide, that we as the body of Christ, we need to do more of that, because there's way too much like going. There's whole cultures, and in different parts of the world where lying is normal, where it's just a normal part of life just to lie. Just, it's part of the culture to lie. I remember reading a long time ago that was part of Bedouin, that I don't know if it's still part of Bedouin culture, but that it was just normal to lie in Bedouin culture. And so I feel like that as Christians, um, in the noble lying, we see it in scripture. God does it. God, there's times when God lies. I don't see how, when God sends the angel to go put, be a lying spirit in the mouth of these false prophets, God is responsible for that. So clearly we when it says God is not a man, he cannot lie, that we need to caveat that is not a blanket thing, right? That's not like it's impossible for him to tell any untruth because he sent an angel to tell an untruth, right? So I do think we need a little bit of nuance there, but to me, there's this broad problem of lying that we need to address. And as the people of God who are striving to have pure hearts, that we need to really think about the beyond just the big lies and the big deceiving lies into the smaller things of cleaning ourselves up. And I think of the questions that I asked, I think the biggest ones are about our ability to be honest with each other, and the kinds of relationships that we have with each other, that we should be developing the kinds of relationships with each other that we really can be honest with each other, even when it's difficult. Right. So I agree with everything that you said. And I just, for my purposes here, I think I'm trying to focus on that other stuff, but absolutely 100%, it's not I agree. There's not some sort of blanket commandment thing that all forms of deception are wrong, because there can be circumstances where deceiving is the admonition against lying is outweighed by some other thing. So I'll say this, and then we'll move on to Ray. That you can use the example of David eating the showbread. It was against the law. It was a sin for David to eat the showbread, but he and his men were starving, and allowing someone to starve is a greater sin, right? So it outweighs it. So it nullifies the sin of not eating the showbread at that point. And I think that can happen with the idea of deceiving someone. If by deceiving them, I am doing something that's actually morally right and good, that outweighs that, then I certainly have not sinned in that case. All right, Ray.
Yeah, interesting topic. It's actually, while I practiced law for 36 years, I saw lots of lying. In fact, I would say that it was even institutionalized by legal procedure to lie.
Wow.
If I had a client that I had to defend and file an answer in court, whether it was true or not, I would lie to the court and say that we deny all the allegations. And it was my job to invite the other side to lie so that I could prove them that they're liars to the judge and that I could impeach them. So lying is very prevalent in our society, and I cannot count the number of times people have sworn to tell the truth and then turn around and lie like a dog. And what's really interesting is when you see people that are actually very decent people get up on a witness stand and lie, and they go fluster, their faces turn red, they're practically forcing themselves to lie. And of course, that's noted by the judge when he sees that.
Wow.
So anyway, the verse that came to my mind, and actually Donna alluded to it, and that is Isaiah 53:9. And his grave was assigned with wicked men, yet he was with a rich man in his death, because he had done no violence, nor was there any deceit in his mouth.
Mhm.
And so Jesus didn't hold back on the truth. He just let us have it. And that's great. That what courage, and someone really to emulate, as we all know.
Yeah.
But anyway, interesting topic, because I would have to say that I have met so many people that are untrustworthy that to trust them with the truth seems to invite more harm than what's really called for. Not everybody is trustworthy, and to hand them something valuable like the truth, and we don't have any control over people. We can't
Mhm.
control what they do. We can't control what they say. So,
Yeah. I think it was Suzanne who said that we're not obligated to provide someone with information, right? Unless there's a situation where we are, right? But
right.
most of the time we're not. And that's not lying, to not provide somebody information, like if, how are you doing today? I'm not doing great. I don't have to go on and tell them all the details about that, right? I don't have to do that. And I think that is an important factor, because I think sometimes I know I've counseled people where they are concerned that they're by not they feel like they're hiding something, or that kind of thing. And depending on the circumstances, they might be, and it might be wrong. But most of the time it's not, right? You're not obligated to tell everybody everything. That doesn't even make any sense.
Well, that's where there's conflict sometimes. As an attorney, I would have a conference with a judge and the other lawyer, and we both know, all three of us know, that both of our clients are lying their heads off. And well, do we go out and tell our client, gee, you're a liar and so's the other guy? Well, that doesn't get us very far in terms of resolving the dispute. So there are times where we don't spill the beans, and that we try to work something out between the judge and the lawyers to make the problem go away.
Yeah.
But it's lying is a big problem in our society. And all you have to do is watch TV and listen to the commercials to to see it.
Yep.
Okay. Well, thank you. Those
All
are
right.
my
Thanks, Ray.
comments.
Did you have something?
Megan and I said, what about when someone says, look at my cute baby, and it's really an ugly, it's an ugly baby. And then what do you do? That's what I said.
I think it's a noble lie to tell everybody that their baby is beautiful.
You can just say, "Oh, how precious."
Yes.
Every life is precious, right? Okay, come on.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Stephen Phyllis.
John, I think you pretty much hit on something that I was going to say about like when life is involved. And God is a lover and protector of life. And whenever it was about the life of someone, God is always just very protective. Even if you think about the lives of the animals that were sacrificed, it wasn't that he didn't like them or they weren't worth anything while millions were sacrificed. He knew the value of their lives for those sacrifices. And during that period of time, they were atoning for us instead of our life. It was their lives. But it's not that he did not value those animals, he created them. And Steve was even saying about how they would take the animals, and, the little lamb, and groom them and let them almost become pets to them, so that when they did sacrifice it, they would feel it. It's not a sacrifice if you don't not have some attachment to it or feel it. And like the showbread, what you were mentioning about David and the showbread, that's another example, the life. And even when the dispute over the Sabbath, and he said, would you not pull, your donkey out of a ditch? God is the lover of life. And I think, and as we, everybody's saying, you know, y- you know what, if anybody understands that situation, God does. I would just have to trust him in that. But I don't think, looking at Rahab, the Corinthian boom, or a lot of other people in the world who've been in the same situation, that we would turn out.
Uh-oh, we lost him.
This is normal for Steve.
Back, Phyllis? Can you hear us?
Huh.
Well, they're muted.
You're back again. You're muted, Phyllis.
They may still be having trouble. Well, let's Stephen Phyllis, thank you. Yeah. Uh that it I think we do need to think about life and what they're in a variety of God's rules. There's always a hierarchy, and sometimes the hierarchy gets codified into things. So Moses allows divorce, right? And but it was, he allowed it because there could be bad circumstances, and so anyway, so thank you. Oh, are you back?
I I couldn't unmute, but now I'm on. So but that's basically what I had to say. And because I do know God, that he gave his son to die so that we might live and have eternal life. So I know he loves life. And anytime that it seemed to have been a choice, God would choose to save a life.
I'll just add just one little quick thing is that, you know, uh, when was the first time we told a lie as a child? Did you remember telling a lie as a child? In the kingdom, this truth is something we have to learn how to do.
Yes.
Lying is in this world, it's almost a thing that just natural. Just like he's saying about the law. I mean, it's one side against the other. Who's telling the truth?
Yep. I think Steve,
we have to we have to understand that the kingdom is the upside down,
Yeah.
and we have to learn how to tell the truth.
Yeah.
Let me say this one thing. When my grandson was little, he's grown now and got 2 kids, but his dad told him, he said, Elijah, don't tell a lie. And Elijah said, Dad, I'm not lying. I'm just tricking you. That's what he would say. He wasn't lying. He said, I'm just tricking you. So hey, we learn it real early.
Oh yeah. If you ever have kids, you know that, I mean, they're barely talking and they're lying.
Mhm.
I mean,
This
it's
is the
like me.
cookie, not me. Chocolate all over your face. Who ate the pudding, Donna? Not me.
Not
Chocolate
me.
everywhere.
Yeah. All right, Edgardo. And we'll wrap it up with Edgardo, and then we'll close out the recording.
It's really a mature topic that that you have shared here, John, and I'm really smiling when a lawyer spoke up. I read the story about 5 children having a quarrel because they saw a cute puppy on the street, and they each one really wanted very badly. And then a cute boy said, anyone who tell a lie so big, a big lie, will have this puppy. And then a minister arrived and saw them having that saw them in that situation and asked them, what's the problem, boys? We want, each one of us wants this puppy. And we have a contest. Anyone who confess, who told a lie, a big lie, then he'll have the puppy. Oh, boys, that game is bad. You shouldn't tell a lie. It's a sin. When I was a young boy like you, I didn't tell a lie. And then everybody say, oh, give the puppy to the minister. Well, it's a joke that I read. I thank God for the topic, John, and I was reading all the 8 statements you have under Am I Lying? One of the things that touched me so much is the first statement. We really need to have self-reflection because sometimes we are saying something that just came out of our mind that we have not thought of, and yet it affects those who are listening to us. And
Yeah.
we need to self-reflect so that we avoid all these things in the future.
Amen.
Nice topic, John. Great topic. I love it. I
Thanks,
love it.
Edgardo.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, well, let me close out the recording. If you're still with us, we appreciate you listening or watching the video, but we'd really rather you join us. And so even if you're just a visitor, even if you do have a local church, come see us on a Wednesday night sometime. Or if you can't get to church on a Sunday morning at some point, come visit us. Even if you're not a regular, member, because you're not isolated and you have your own church, at some point, if you can't go to church that day, come spend some time with us. And you can find us again at the website here, a2kchurch.org, and just go there. You can get in contact with us through the website there. We're also on Facebook we have the Christian Virtual Fellowship page, as well as the Allegiance to the King group on Facebook as well. And then on YouTube, I should put, you know what? We need to put this in the links on in the videos themselves. We actually have 2 YouTube channels. You're seeing this one from the Christian Virtual Fellowship channel, but we also have the Allegiance to the King channel on YouTube as well. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
John, I got